Contract's now trying to do solo here. He gets the kill. A double kill onto Ryu now. Now they're looking for Arrow. Ray's coming in. The flag and drag close. The ultimate's down and almost up if they can continue the long fight. A triple kill from Contract. Looking for the Quadra. A Quadra kill. And Sneaky takes the last one to clean it up. A full ace coming in for Cloud9.
Is an absolute beast.
Cloud9 persevere, come out strong, finish at the end of the split strong, and they will be looking for the finals in Vancouver.
Hello and welcome to NALCS tonight. After this weekend, probably more aptly named NALCS this afternoon, with two big 3-0 series coming through this weekend. I'm Dash alongside Kobe and Jat. We're going to break down all the happenings from this weekend and just talk about some League of Legends. So, big series out of both FlyQuest and TSM today, as well as C9 Phoenix won yesterday. Let's recap the weekend, starting with today's series, TSM FlyQuest.
Yeah, this series, as we mentioned, was pretty quick as far as 3-0s go, but that's just not to say the first game and the third game weren't relatively close. I mean, FlyQuest did have some opportunities to pull out some big plays. They just could never quite transition into a meaningful advantage.
You talk about games 1 and 3, even game 2 with the Baron take from FlyQuest that brought the gold lead within, maybe a surmountable distance. It definitely felt like at any moment this series could have ballooned into a 5-game one. However, TSM just getting the better of FlyQuest at each turn.
Yeah, I mean, you never really feel super comfortable against, teams that high is on, no matter what your gold lead is, because of that, factor that he brings to the table, where he is not afraid to continue fighting till the very end, go for risky plays, looks for any avenue to get back into it.
Absolutely, and I think kind of one of the biggest things that was really showcased here in the series today was the consistency of the TSM roster kind of across the board, shown through how hard it was to make a decision around player of the series, right? That it could have gone to more than one member. Did go to Hanser, very stellar play out of him in the top lane. But overall, everyone on TSM had a moment in this series where they were either carrying or were the main kind of cause of momentum for the squad.
Yeah, incredibly hard decision for player of the series between Hanser and Bjergsen pretty much, which has been the story for the year. I mean, I'm sure when all of us were trying to fill out our MVP ballots, we're wondering, like, who should we actually put for who's more influential in TSM's success? Because Bjergsen is such a rock in the mid lane. Hanser, as well, is being played around, and in this series, it felt like they played around Hanser a lot more, and he was a higher impact player in the team fights as this monster tank in the majority of circumstances.
And even Turtle stepping up pretty big there with Lucian in game number 1, had a lot of, fancy feet as well. And then the consistent first pick, Ash, prioritizing there from FlyQuest, even though he's losing a little bit in lane, had some very solid performances as well.
Right, the global trend of Ash first picks, or high priority at least on Ash, developing here in North America as well. We'll see what happens when we get to the finals and how those metas will develop. Speaking of the finals, TSM going to be going up against C9, so a rematch of our summer finals. But C9 had to get over Phoenix 1 in order to get there. They also did it in 3-0 fashion. Let's break down yesterday's series as well.
Yeah, this one was another one that went pretty quick as far as who was winning between C9 and Phoenix 1. You're thinking maybe Phoenix 1 would pull something in after that last week. Yeah,
and yesterday's victory for C9 comes off the back of some big plays from Contracts, specifically. D. Claude writes on Twitter, ironically, Contracts digging a lot of graves with that quadra kill. Big game out of him there, but across the series as a whole, we saw the rookie of the split coming up big.
I have to say, that might have actually been his best series the entire split. And as far as trajectory of players, this is exactly how you want it to ramp up, right? This is one of the rookies that has had the most support. Super big organization. He was with a bunch of veterans when he was in the Challengers scene, and it really has shown. He was an absolute monster in that series for Cloud9, and he'll be a big part of the matchup versus TSM.
And it's so interesting, too, because at the very start of the year, C9 said, we think we're going to have a slow start as Contracts kind of gets his footing in the LCS. And they raced off to this 8-0 start. And then it looked like Contracts wasn't kind of finding it. I personally didn't have him as my rookie of the split. But when you look at his playoff performance, he's arrived, right? He's going to be a huge force for them if they are to be the NALCS champions.
Absolutely.
And he is incredibly self-aware as well. That's one of the things with this guy. He seems, a bit more mature than you would expect from someone his age. And he's very self-critical, knows that, he had a long period there in the regular split where he's like, I was not performing up to my expectations or my team's expectations. And he seems to have a very level head about his as improvement.
Absolutely. I mean, I had the pleasure of interviewing him about that Rookie of the Split award that he received, and he echoed a lot of those same sentiments that you just shared, Kobe. The fact that he is more about making sure that the team finds success, not about his individual successes within the season.
Yeah, and if you're looking at this series they had, there's not really a weakness to point out on the way C9 performed. They had success with both top laners, Impact and Ray. Contracts was a standout player in the series. Smoothie and Sneaky were good in lane. Jensen destroyed Ryu. Everything really went well for C9 in that series.
And I think what makes that what makes the finals matchup between TSM and C9 so fun is the fact that both of them came out of this weekend in that 3-0 fashion, right? So when we look at the #1 seed, #2 seed rematch from Summer, you know, there's going to be a lot of questions around the power of these teams coming in because they were so dominant here, and now the question is who was more dominant. Right?
Exactly, and they actually, you know, even if you go lane by lane, I think they match up very, very well stylistically as well. So should definitely be more than 3 games, James.
I want more than 3 games desperately, Kobe. I mean, let's dive into the matchup a little bit more than, okay, these are both strong teams. Where do we see the TSM C9 matchup kind of hinging as compared to, you know, the matchups that we saw this weekend?
It's crazy, right? Because as Kobe mentioned, every spot could kind of go either way. It's anyone's game to take. If I had to pick kind of where it could hinge or would hinge, I would still say around Bjergsen and Jensen because Bjergsen has consistently been a pressure player, and even though Jensen has been great, in the highest pressure moments, I haven't seen him step up in the way of a champion.
It's tough, right? Because you look at a series like today and we were saying, hey, perhaps the most lopsided matchup is going to be that top lane, Haunter versus Balls. Okay, but if you now put Impact up there, seems a lot more even, to your point about kind of across the board things seeming more even. Or Ray even, right? A different look and an aggressive look that we saw out of C9 this weekend. What about the jungle, right? Because today we teed up Svenskeren versus Moon, and within the microcosms of the game, we saw moments where Moon was getting the better of Svenskeren. Could that same thing happen with the way the Contracts has been playing most recently?
It's why, you know, inconsistency is one of the things we hear the most about jungle because there's so many options in that role, because that role has so many choices to make at all stages, especially in the early game. The inconsistency, it could be a very big factor. I mean, yes, Contracts is coming off probably his best match or best series that he has had all year long. However, you know, Svenskeren has also had very high highs as well as the low lows there, especially concerning, you know, starting out the series and game #1s and stuff like that. But at the core, I don't see there being a huge advantage for either of those junglers. You know, holistically, we take the entire season into account, and it more depends on who shows up on this day. Is he actually ready with the pressure of playing in the finals? You know, Contract still is technically a rookie.
Yeah, that's true. He hasn't played in front of, he's played on this stage. He hasn't played in front of thousands of people on an arena stage.
Yeah, and the margins between these teams as well are still thin, even if you look at the bottom lane, right? You still give Smoothie and Sneaky the edge, I feel like, in this situation. But I do think what you just brought up, the nerves, potentially are what kind of decides it when you're playing on that biggest stage.
Right.
Smoothie, best season he's had. Will he be able to keep that up on the biggest stage? Jensen, I feel like, had that pivotal moment last year. You can even go back to when he was playing Talia and he flashed forward to try and kill Doublelift, and Doublelift turned it around for the quadra kill. Those are the moments that stick with you forever, and that's what you kind of have to overcome in these huge moments.
Series-defining moments. I'm sure we'll get plenty of them next week. We talked specifically about the finals. We have to remember that the day before that, we've got the 3rd, 4th place matchup between Phoenix One and FlyQuest. Let's talk about that one, preview that a little bit, because once again, now we're talking about 2 teams that come off of 3-0 defeats. And I think a lot of this it's about that rebound, right? Which team is going to pick themselves up quicker and move towards the finals with kind of a reset mind about how they're going to attack the games.
And both of these teams have already, within their history, already had to pick themselves up after losses, right? So both of these teams, you know, have experience basically coming off of losses and
they can get back up again.
Having to turn around.
They've been knocked down.
Honestly, though, this one I feel like might even be more important in the jungle, just because of how core we keep on mentioning, especially for FlyQuest. You know, Moon and Hai, what they bring to the team, but especially Inori. And you talk about mentality and playing on stage and the pressure that gets up to you. You know, he has had a very up and down history in the LCS as well, and he's always, even though they haven't put Meteos in, there is kind of that over your shoulder look where, like, oh, you know, they put him in, even though it was the last game in their series where they got 3-0'd. jungle substitutions, like, is that going to be a factor, adding more pressure to his play?
Yeah, and we've seen substitutions, mid-series substitutions pay off occasionally. I don't like it when P1 does it, for whatever reason. I haven't seen their mid-series substitutions pay off. I'd like to see them go with the Inori stunt lineup and just ride with it for the whole series.
All right.
I feel like one of the reasons for that is because they always seem reactive, like, oh no, something bad is going wrong, get somebody else up there, instead of like the sword, shield, spear thing that C9 have going, and they're like, all right, we're going to use a different weapon now, haha.
And now I might be falling into the same trap that a lot of people fell into for the entirety of the split in underestimating FlyQuest here, but when I look at Phoenix 1, similar to the way that I look at the matchup between TSM and FlyQuest, I would say that across the lanes, I feel like FlyQuest is still outmatched, right? Ryu against Hai, in terms of Ryu at his high points in his extremes and Arrow in his extremes as compared to Altec, feel like the stronger carries between these two teams, and that I would probably be more confident in Phoenix 1 taking the series for those reasons. But look, FlyQuest is here, right? At the beginning of the season, we expected them to be near the bottom of the table, maybe not even in playoffs, and yet they've surprised up until this point.
Yeah, and if we look at the entirety of the regular season, Phoenix 1 was competing for a playoff bye. They finished 3rd. FlyQuest finished 5th. And I haven't seen anything in the playoffs that makes me think FlyQuest has suddenly past Phoenix 1 as far as power rankings would be concerned, so I do think Phoenix 1 would be the favorite.
All right. Any last thoughts here, Kobe, before we go?
The thing that still worries me for Phoenix 1 are their 2 positions that are constantly rotating for substitutions. Because remember, even though we focus so heavily on the jungle, the support as well. And Arrow, a lot of these big carry performances were when he actually had Adrian by his side.
Right.
And it hasn't been talked about too much, Adrian leaving the team, but that did affect this team fairly heavily, and is, maybe a difference from the regular season.
Hey, it's that balance between flexibility and strategy as compared to comfortability. And
warding,
right?
The ward numbers, the difference is drastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Adrian warded more than anyone for the most part, and helped set them up a lot of plays.
Either way, we had 2 very dominant series this weekend. We're hoping for a really competitive 5-game series next weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us here this evening. So I want to thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week in Vancouver.